Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to listen to these impressive contributions, where I learned a lot. I will talk about not food, but as you see, I'm really interested in food. And to reveal a secret, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm a butcher's son, a butcher's grandson, and a butcher's great-grandson. So I'm a member of an old butcher family. But I think, and there I come to the point, speaking about the global situation. We are living in a fascinating time, because this will change not only based on what happened with the coronavirus in 2019 and the follow-up, it will change almost everything. And listening carefully to the contributions I had the opportunity to listen to this morning, also the food industry will be heavily inflicted by this dramatic global change. What is the global change I'm talking about? We, in our time, have reached, I think, a dramatic break in the development of our species, of the Homo sapiens. We, based on the successes of human society, of the human genius, on our brilliant brains, we have reached a level where I suppose this cannot go on as it used to be since a long time back. We will face quite a new challenge. We have reached the boundaries of the planet. Let's face it. And this will have a dramatic impact. And talking about these issues, I think this will have also dramatic impact on how we understand political power, how the international system works. We are used with our loyalty, that our loyalty is with our group, our peer group, family, tribes, nations. But if I look to the present developments, we see just the opposite. Great power rivalry is back on the global stage. At the end of the Cold War, we thought, that's it. Great power rivalry will not come back. The fantastic development of a communist society like China promises that there will be a new beginning. And what do we see now? We see an ongoing confrontation between the two superpowers of the 21st century, between China and the US. Talks about, I think, personally think, irresponsible talks about a new Cold War. The last Cold War lasted 40 years. Do we have the time for another Cold War? Do we have the resources for another Cold War? My answer is twice no, we don't have it. We are confronted with the boundaries of the planet, which needs cooperation. The old days where human societies were confronting each other in the extreme going to war to each other has come to an end. How can we reach positive results in the fight against climate change if the two major nations, the US and China, will go into confrontation to each other? It's impossible. We need them both. We need the cooperation. Also the scientific cooperation if we want to produce positive results. This is a huge change, ladies and gentlemen. The whole international system will dramatically be transformed into the direction, hopefully, of cooperation, not any longer on confrontation. This is, I think, one of the most dramatic results of changing the basic patterns of our life on this globe. And there is no other globe. There's only this one. So this will have a dramatic impact on industry, on trade, on how we understand political power. This is not only another chapter of the same book. This is the beginning of a new book. At least this is my impression. And you are facing the same in your industry. How we eat is not only a technological question. It's a basic cultural question. Since the beginning of mankind, the man defined itself, its culture, based on how we produce, how we consume food. This shouldn't be forgotten. And therefore, I think we are facing a brand new world. But this is the only opportunity. Mankind is still growing. Up to 2050, Africa will double its population. If they will not end up in a huge starvation, in civil wars, in killing each other, and huge migration wave, they must industrialize. How will they do that? How will finance it? This is the core question. And how will they find enough food? So we are in a very challenging environment. At the same moment, we see that the political sphere, the global political sphere, is falling back on traditional power rivalry. And there, I think, the Europeans are playing an important role. We are closely linked to our American allies based on values, the same shared values, based on a common security. This is becoming more and more shaky. We are very close. So I think Europe should try to do everything to contain, to moderate these growing confrontation between the two giants in the 21st century. China is too big, and China is too successful to be contained in the traditional way. They are too important in the world, in the global economy. And therefore, we have to find solutions, arrangements, which will not be easy to be found, but I think it's doable. But we must avoid a full-fledged confrontation as we see it in the Taiwan Strait nowadays. Taiwan is the most dangerous point at the moment, I would say, around the globe. Very dangerous. And therefore, I think we must getting our act together here in Europe. And this is the moment where I'm talking about the German elections. The German elections started an election cycle, which will end up in November next year with the American midterm elections, which will be also extremely important. In between, we have the French presidential and then parliamentary elections. So Germany started, and it started with I would say, a wise decision of the voters. The Germans are never have been real revolutionaries like our French neighbors on the left side of the Rhine. Germans like to be more based on continuity. So to vote for the Greens, this would have meant to kick out the so-called Big Tent parties of the past. In the meanwhile, the tent shrunk dramatically. To support also the claim of the majority party, that in this case the Greens, for the chancellery. This would have looked like a revolution. So they voted still for a former Big Tent party, the Social Democrats, backed the Greens. They are pretty strong. I'm happy about the result for my party, but not too strong. A third player is needed. The business-friendly liberals are the third player. What is astonishing that in Germany, the major party, the Christian Democratic Union for many years, collapsed immediately. They are now evolved into an infight, a very ugly, a very unpleasant and bloody infight, and they will be focused for the upcoming months, I think, to sort out their internal power question. This might also hurt, I don't want to go too much into the details, but my open question is whether the Bavarian Christian Democratic Union, sister party of the Christian Democratic Union, will survive untouched. Whether this whole construction of two parties under the umbrella of one will survive. Whether the Bavarian Prime Minister, who played a very unconstructive role during the election campaign, will survive. Because the result of the Bavarian sister party was not very good. And they have Bavarian elections next year. So there are a lot of implications. But what we see nowadays is that the three-party, Greens, Liberals, and the Social Democrats are, well, I don't know the English word, are in consulting talks. Not negotiations, but consulting talks, whatever this means. They are doing very well, and I don't believe that this will end up in a failure. So expect the next government will be a Social Democratic-led government by the three parties. This is a brand new construction and means a power shift, because usually the chancellor is the dominant figure. But this power basis for the chancellor, for the upcoming chancellor, will be shrinking. It's smaller than before. And the two parties, the Greens and the Liberals, made an extremely wise step, which changed the whole setting. They decided to meet beforehand. They will meet the Social Democrats. This means that these two parties, together 26 plus something %, are stronger than the Social Democrats. And this is the real kind of German-type revolution. In the three-party coalition system, you have nowadays parties which are more or less on the same level. The Social Democrats with 26-something, the Greens with almost 15, and the Liberals with almost 12. So all the three parties are in the two-digit sector, and together with a close cooperation of Greens and Liberals, this will lead to a switch of power. So it will be fascinating to see how this will develop and what this means. It's quite clear The basic message is Germany will continue to be governed out of the center. The fringes have lost. That's a very good message, because Germany plays an important role in the European construction. We are the biggest industrialized economy in Europe. We are by far the biggest population, and our geopolitical location is right in the center of Europe. So it's extremely important that Germany will continue to be governed not by the fringes, and we have a very complicated history, of course. So to be governed out of the center is extremely important for Germany and for Europe. And this will continue. But then we will see how this will develop. In the substance, I think, for this huge transformation I spoke before, it will be a very interesting cooperation between a party which is representing big business and a party which is representing the green movement. This is a very promising combination, and I'm pretty happy about the outcome of the elections. In European policies, I think there won't be a dramatic change. It will depend on the negotiations with the liberals, how they will deal with the question of austerity. There is, from my point of view, no way back before 2019. And I think one of the most promising European actions will be the reconstruction program. 750 billion euros will be spent, especially for investments in the transformation, in digitalization, and in scientific research. And this offers a great opportunity for member states' economies like Italy and some others in the south to catch up with the north. If this will happen, I think we will see a much more dynamic Europe in the coming future. The Commission is prepared for that, and I think this offers also great opportunities for the business community. But it remains to be seen how this will develop. We are facing, of course, huge challenges. The relationship to Russia, unfortunately, is bad and will be worse in the future. Why so? I said unfortunately, because Russia and the EU are both living on the same continent, and this will continue forever. So we are neighbors, and neighbors should have excellent relations. I would be in favor to improve these relations. But when I'm looking to what's going on in Eastern Ukraine and in general in Eastern Europe, when I see the positions of the Russian president and the folks around him, they are still thinking in the terms of the late 19th century, unfortunately. The 21st century is not the 19th century. Power is not any longer defined on a strong military and on territory. Look to the two major superpowers of the 21st century. It's mostly about technology, about the competition in the technological sector. And if you look to the difference to Russia and to China, I think China went through a broad-based modernization, with one exception. The political system is still the old one. But all the other sectors are modernized. The Russian President Vladimir Putin decided before he became again Russian president to keep everything as it is. The oligarchs and the whole system, which is not very efficient. Moscow and Petersburg are wonderful cities, but outside, 1 hour outside of these two brilliant cities, it's the beginning of a mess. And it's a pity, because a modernized Russia would be in the interest of all the Europeans, not only in Eastern Europe. But the decision was made, no broad-based modernization. Why? Because the concern was, I think realistically, that a broad-based modernization of the economy and huge investments in technology will lead to a rising democratic movement, will be a rising cry for change. And this was not on the agenda of the Russian president. Unfortunately, I think we will see a worsening of the relationship, not an improvement, but it's a matter of fact. On the other side, we see, I spoke before about the challenge of China. I don't believe that this should lead into a huge confrontation. I'm in favor of a more cooperative approach towards China, but not going back to the old days. In the old days, we were blind, or mostly the business community were blind, towards the strategic implications of the strategic intentions of the Communist Party. And we should be aware about these strategic intentions. But this will also lead to an improvement, or this should lead to an improvement of the relations, but we cannot forget the risks of a confrontation. I mentioned Taiwan. There is also the risk in the South China Sea, and I think the ongoing trade conflict is not very healthy for nobody. So from that point of view, I think in geopolitics we have a lot. The new government in Germany and the Commission in Brussels have a lot to do to try to improve the situation. But all in all, the major focus will be climate change. I must tell you, I personally was shocked by the recent report of the UN. We are under an extreme time pressure. And what the main speaker before this morning outlined, I think this all is based on the assumption that climate change will not be so dramatic and will not accelerate in a high-speed level. But if it will do that, and all the predictions are moving in a different direction, then I think all these calculations will be overrun by the facts. And this is really dramatic. We will see a dramatic change. And the rich countries must lead in this change. Decarbonization of the world economy. It's, I think, the biggest effort which was ever made, much bigger than industrialization. And it depends. It depends on very different issues. Water crises. I'm asking myself what will happen with the US West or the Midwest, knowing the big droughts and the changes in the climate. This is one of the big resources for feeding the global community. What will happen if there's something dramatic happens, if the droughts will continue? This is only one question. So governments will have to address these issues. And they will be forced to cooperate, ladies and gentlemen. If they don't do that, there is no chance. If they do it, there might be a chance to move ahead in the right direction. But it will be a dramatic challenge for all of us. And a future without a good state is not very promising, I must tell you. And I belong as a person to those who would appreciate it to change the state to some insects. I'm pretty frank. And I would say I represent a strong group of people in very different cultures. Maybe the reason is that I'm older than 70, so the future is not mine. But we are facing these challenges, and I think this is one of the most fascinating times we see. And I'm pretty jealous that I'm not younger to be active, involved in these great transformations, as many of you will be. So I wish you all the best. I wish you success, and you have to play a very important role as the food industry, an extremely important role. But don't forget the cultural element. It will play a very strong role if you're talking about transition. Thank you very much.